right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Skill Up session today. How do I come up with a dissertation topic with Dr. David Benders? My name is Dr. Jenna Johnson, and I am an academic learning specialist with the Academic Training Academy. We're going to go over just a few housekeeping items before I hand the session over to Dr. Benders. We are recording the session, and the video for it will be posted on the YouTube Skill Up series page within 24 hours. I'll put that link in the chat for anyone who wants it. If you do have any questions throughout the session, I do ask that you hold on to them until the end of the presentation. We're going to save time after the presentation for some Q&A. And then also, captions are enabled. You can turn these on by hovering over the bottom of the Zoom window to see the controls. Then you'll select the CC option and choose to show captions, and you can turn them off at any time. With that, I'm going to turn it on over to Dr. Benders.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking your time out your busy schedule to allow me to present this topic to you. My motivation for doing this presentation is I've been working with doctoral students for over 20 years. I know I don't look that old, but I have. And one of the things that I find is that the foundations of what they begin to try to do causes them anxiety later on, and a lot of students aren't able to be successful. So there's going to be some things that we're going to talk about within this that I'm sure you've never heard before, and no one's ever presented to you in this way. And I hope that I have students from all different parts of their dissertation journey, from those who are still taking coursework to those who are probably even in their CMP course and just starting out. But when I begin to present this to you, it's going to make sense at the end. So at the end, we're going to have a session where you can ask me some questions and those kinds of things. And we're going to jump right into this. Okay. So welcome. This presentation is going to be broken up into 4 sections. A lot of times students don't understand what a dissertation is. So we're going to have to break up what is a dissertation and why is it so difficult? Why is this thing such a difficult and daunting task? And such a small number percent of people are the ones that are able to complete it. Then what we're going to talk about is let's going to make it simple. And the approach that I'm going to teach you is what I like to call a gap approach. And a lot of times when I meet my students for the very first time in my CMP class, I'll ask them, do you know what a gap is? And they say, well, they tell me all these different things. And a lot of times, most of the times, they're not correct on what is the gap and how to find it. So we're going to talk about that again. And then I'm going to go through an example of how this process actually works. And by the time I finish my example, you'll see the power of this gap and you'll see how all of this stuff comes together and makes sense. Okay? So what is a dissertation? A dissertation is not a research paper. Why do I start and say that? Because all your academic career, you thought you were doing doing research, but really all you were doing what is called a position paper. You come up with an idea and you say, why do women face barriers in climbing the corporate ladder? And then you go to the library and you find all these articles that say the exact same thing. And then you put them together, right? And then you present this paper. And then you get academically started to grow up a little bit. And then you say, I'm going to find all these articles about these authors that say the exact same thing that I want them to say. But then you can say, well, I'm going to grow up a little bit. I'm going to find a couple of dissenting opinions that don't really agree with what I'm saying. And then I'm going to put them in the paper. And then you submit it. And then you say, well, there's my research paper. And we called it a research paper. And we thought because we went to the library and did research that we did some research. Okay. So that's what we think is when we go to the dissertation, because we've been taught nothing different. The only difference in a dissertation is we're supposed to collect some data. So we then say, I'm going to go interview a couple people. I'm going to go throw this survey in there. And none of it really makes sense of milli gels, but we just throw it in there because we think this is what we're supposed to be doing. Okay. So what people don't understand is a dissertation is not meant for you to save the world. Okay. And it makes me cringe when I talk to my students for the very first time. And they're like, well, what do you want to study? Well, I want to study why this particular program is not allowing students to be academically successful. And I'm going to close the achievement gap. And I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to save the field of education. Or I'm going to create this economic equity between these interracial groups and these groups of different economic disparities. And I'm going to solve this problem. The dissertation is not designed for you to solve anything. I'm going to say that again. You are not solving anything when you do a dissertation. Well, Dr. Benders, well, what is it that we're doing? I'm going to get to that part in a minute. but you're not solving anything. So if you stop going into this thinking I'm going to fix something and I'm going to solve something, it's going to help you. It is simply an academic exercise. It's a demonstration of research knowledge for you to understand through a application process. Okay. So I always tell my students, this is when they come to me with these things, I say, hey, I want you to do the 5-person challenge. I want you to name to me 5 people that you think are going to actually read your dissertation from cover to cover. And they say, you, the researcher, your chair, your subject matter expert, your academic reviewer. Now, I was married when I was doing my dissertation. And I remember rolling over to my wife that loved me so much that she would want to spend the rest of her life with me. And I said, hey, sweetheart, I would love to get a new pair of eyes on this thing. Would you start reading my dissertation? And I remember looking over her at her, and she was watching TV, turning the pages, looking at this thing. You know why? Because no one wants to read this thing. No one absolutely cares about this dissertation. And she said, oh, baby, you're doing a great job. I can't wait to call you doctor. Oh, my goodness, this is awesome. Okay, so let's lower our expectations on, we're not going to do this thing and it's going to get to the Department of Education. We're not going to do this thing and it's going to get to Elon Musk and he's going to come up with a new invention for us. It's not what's going to happen. Let's just lower our expectations and meet the expectations to get it done. Okay, all of us have looked at dissertations for assignments, right? And you've looked at some of these dissertations that are 5 pages, some are 50 pages, some are 15 million pages. And you're like, well, what's the difference? They just got done. That's it. They met the expectation for their committee and they got it done. Okay. So a dissertation is not a perfect document. It is an academic exercise. Okay. So if you now understand what a dissertation is, what is it that we need to do and how do we complete this thing? Okay. Since I'm not saving the world and we're going to lower our expectations, here's part 2. Okay. Why are people not finishing this doctorate degree? If it's such an easy thing, Dr. Benders, why is nobody finishing it? And I'm going to tell you, the truth is 2 issues. Here's issue number 1. The issue number 1 is your committee. Well, Dr. Benders, they're the professors of the university, and they're these great scholars and this and that. They're also 3 people with 3 different opinions. Okay? And when you start off your process, writing this position paper, and you get one person to read it, they can read it and interpret it one way. The next person can read it and ask you to go in another direction. The next person can read it and ask you to go in a totally different direction. And what begins to happen is this. You get in what I like to call a hamster wheel. Because the chair is going to read it and they're going to say, oh, well, I think this is a great idea. And then someone else is going to read it and they're going to say, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I don't know where you're going with this thing. Okay. And what happens is you have so many times that you rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. Before you know it, you've actually changed the idea. Okay. The committee is broken up and made up of people with various perspectives, individuals with a personal background, right? So if I read something, my personal background is going to come into play and how I feel this can go. What students need to understand is every idea can be studied using both methodologies. Okay. For example, if I want to do a study on the first African-American lived experience of the first African-American president, I can do a study and it's the exact same study. And I'm doing a qualitative study because I'm looking at the perspectives of the African-American president, right? But if I want to look at what are the leadership skills that have a relationship to becoming a president, now I'm doing the exact same study where I'm looking at, and I can use to put the African-American in it, so we now narrow it down to only one person. I'm still now going to be looking at the leadership of the African-American person, but now I'm doing a quantitative study because I'm looking at how variables interact with how this person achieved this phenomenon. Okay? It has nothing to do with those things. Every study can be looked at in 2 different lenses, but because there's no clear direction, you can get all different kinds of opinions. And this is going to make a little bit more sense as we go through this presentation. But remember, just kind of hold on to some of this information that I'm presenting to you as we get to my example, okay? One of the other biggest issues on why students don't finish is because students get tired of the iterative process. What do I mean by that? It's an iteration. It's over and over and over and rewrite, 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 go back in, try again, try again. Now, Why is it a stressful situation? It overlaps with the first idea where you got all these different opinions. Because we say you'll hear catchphrase jargon. It has to be grounded in the literature. What does that actually mean? I got a bunch of citations in here, Dr. Benders. So why is it not grounded in the literature? I'll explain that to you in a minute. Okay. Students aren't given a clear belief or a clear direction of where they're going. And they're like, well, I wrote 50 pages. What do you mean you don't understand what I'm trying to write? And I try to tell my students, yeah, you wrote 50 pages, but they're all over the place because your position is already stated. And if your position is stated, you've technically already answered what you're saying that you're going to explore. Okay. And they fall into what I like to call that hamster wheel. You go over and over, and before you're writing, you don't even know what to do. You become so frustrated that you stop. And then I like my statements when I get my students and I say, Dr. Benders, me and you've been having these meetings for 6 weeks. I'm so frustrated. Just tell me what to do. And that's not the process. Okay. The dissertation is simply a comprehensive exercise of all parts must fit together. Okay. Everything must make sense. It's not just I'm going to pull some stuff out the sky and throw it against the wall and see if it fits. Okay. Everything must make sense. And the last reason why students aren't able to be successful is because there's no direct connection between all these classes that you took and how it then transfers to the dissertation. What do I mean by that? So many of my students come to me and they got 3.8 GPAs and 3.9 GPAs and 3.99999 GPAs. And then they're looking at me and I'm like, well, what's the difference between a qualitative and a quantitative study? And they go, well, quantitative has numbers, and that's not accurate. Okay. Qualitative can have numbers too. It's called descriptive statistics. But that's not the reason in understanding the overall difference between those two methodologies. And sometimes there's a disconnect between the content and the knowledge that the students learn in these classes and then applying it to what a dissertation is. Okay. And applying it to the academic exercise, right? We go into our classrooms and they'll have you, hey, go look for the problem statement. So what do? You find an article, you do a quick word search, and you look for what is the problem. And when you look at that, you go in there, you plug it in, and it says the problem for this study to be studied is, or the problem is, and you just click in there and you write it and you do your summary article, you get your A for your assignment, right? The iterative process is with the dissertation. You don't just get an A every time you submit. You get some feedback and it goes back to you. Get some feedback and it goes back to you. You get some feedback and it goes back to you. And you start feeling like you fall in that hamster wheel because you have no clear direction. Okay? And when you get into that frustration mode, it becomes easy for students to quit. Because it's not like in your current classes, you submit something, you get a grade. And most of my students don't even, let's be honest, most of my students don't even look at my feedback. If they got an A for an assignment, they don't look at the feedback. They just move on to the next assignment and think, okay, I'm done. Got an A, move on. Whereas this process is very different. It's more about the feedback versus the grade that you got that's going to allow you to keep making steps of progress. And then students begin to get frustrated, like, well, I've been doing this. I got my 9901A and I got a B in that class, or I got a C and I'm still continuing and I'm not making any progress and blah, 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 blah. So I'm mad because I don't feel like I'm getting the feedback that I need. You are getting feedback. The challenge is you're all over the place. And your chair and your committee is reading this and they're just looking at it and they're saying it's all over the place. So what is a good dissertation? Every dissertation must follow 3 main points. The first point, your dissertation must be aligned with the degree program that you are getting your doctorate degree in. You can't write a dissertation about AI when your degree is in psychology, unless you bridge it to show how AI is having a psychological impact on something. Okay? Your degree must be related to your dissertation directly, not implied, right? Directly stated, and to make a connection between your degree and your dissertation topic. Second point, every dissertation must be in alignment with all the other components. Okay? What do I mean by that? the people who you're going to collect data from must be aligned with the research questions, your purpose statement, your problem statement. All those things have to fit together. And I like to use this little analogy of like a puzzle. And I'll show you a slideshow of that in a second. Okay. But the third point is your dissertation has to be relevant, right? So right now, when you hear of the term the 5-year window of academics, where your lit review has to have 80% must be within 5 years. What I like to tell my students to do is find a dissertation topic within 3 years, because your topic has to be something that you're very interested in, and it's going to be relevant for the next 2 years, because you're going to be working on this thing for about 1.5 to 2 years. So you want to have something that you're very interested in. Okay. Your dissertation is like a puzzle. Every piece must fit together in order to make the puzzle look correct. Now, there is no way, many of us have done puzzles before, right? When I was younger, my mom and I used to do puzzles all the time. And my mother used to take the approach where she would find all the edges of the corners, and she would put those together first. I didn't like that approach. So I would look for that distinct character or that distinct trait of the puzzle, like the eye or a specific color. And I'd start there and I just work my way around. Neither approach was incorrect, as long as all of the puzzle pieces, when it's all said and done, fit together. And guess what? You don't have to force them in, right? Remember those kids that will push that puzzle piece down real, real hard and try and force it in? No, all you need to do is just place it and everything would fit together. So what I just want to get done, Dr. Benders, I've been working on this thing and I'm tired of doing it, and I just want to get done so I can move on with the rest of my life. Where do I begin? You begin with understanding the foundations of your study. Okay? The foundations of your study start at the beginning. How do I come up with a viable dissertation topic? Everyone has something of interest. Okay? I like to use this example, and I tell my students all the time. They be like, Dr. Benders, but everything out there is very, very important. And I tell them all the time, not everyone agreed that slavery was a bad thing. So not everyone cares about your topic. So you telling me, oh, this is something that everyone needs to start doing? No, they don't. Because I can show you many people, even today, that would put some people in slavery and be okay with it because there were some benefits for them, right? So not everyone agrees that your study is viable or anything that everyone needs to read, okay? But here's some good news. Everyone here is already done looking through the literature. The issue is you just don't know what you're doing when you look at these articles, okay? We look at these articles and we read these articles and we put so much information in our head, and no one's ever taught you how to read an article for the relevance of the information that the article is presenting to you. Because the requirements of an article is different from the requirements of a dissertation. What do I mean by that? Part 3. What we're going to start doing, what I'm going to teach you is, how do we look at this article to understand what am I seeing? Okay? The research process. What you're going to do from now on is you're going to look at this dissertation process as, I'm not trying to save the world. Okay? Let's save the world when I'm not paying tuition. Try that one, right? Y'all go ahead and write that down. Save the world when you're not paying tuition. Right? So right now, your expectation is to meet the expectation of your chair to move forward. Stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to have this perfect document as if it's going to be super duper dissertation of the year and all that kind of stuff. Just meet the expectations and get it done. Okay? So what is a gap? Earlier on, I talked to my students, and the first thing everything starts with is what is considered the gap in the literature. And a lot of times I ask students, I say, well, tell me, what is the gap and where do I find it? 99% of the times I ask my students, they have absolutely no true understanding of what is a gap. Okay? A gap is critical, and it's the foundations of what it is that you're going to be doing. It is what is not known about a topic and what is being told that we need to do in order to understand this topic better. I'm going to explain that in a second. It's the easiest thing in the world when you understand it. A gap is not. I think this needs to be learned or explored because I've read a bunch of articles, and I'm talking about you, the researcher, right? Me, the student. I've read a bunch of articles, Dr. Benders, and I haven't seen anybody study this. I haven't seen anybody study why Dr. Benders is the best professor in the world. So this definitely needs to be studied. No, it doesn't. That doesn't make it a gap. A gap is not. There's limited information because I haven't been able to find this stuff, so I know this needs to be studied. It's not a gap. No one figured this information out yet, so that's why it needs to be studied. It's not a gap. I haven't found any gaps. I haven't found anything, but I see this happening in my world. I see this out there in my community, in my school, in my job. That's not a gap. A gap is not what you, the researcher, feel or see. It's not a gap. A gap is very simple. A gap is what the person who's already done research tells the next person what they need to learn next about this topic. A gap is when I do an article or I do a study, I am going to tell the rest of the world, here's what I've learned. Here is what needs to be learned next in order to take this topic to the next phase. So where is this thing located? Where can I find it, Dr. Benders? The gap is not located in the body of the article. It is located at the end of the article. Okay? Now, all articles are not required to write what is considered a recommendation for future research or a gap. Okay? And the lack of information found is, of course, not a gap, right? At the conclusion of an article is where you would find the gap. Here's an article. Stop reading articles. I know no one's ever told you that. Well, Dr. Benders, why you don't want me to read these articles? The reason why you don't want to read these articles when you're looking for what it is that you want to study is because the article tells you, I'm reporting what I did as the researcher. So here's the article. I'm reporting all this stuff that I wrote. So I'm writing about this. Here's the keywords, the introduction, my methodology, and all these kind of different stuff. I don't need to know what they've done at this point when I'm trying to figure out what is it that I want to study. What I want to study is what is considered in this section here, the last slide that says recommendations for future students or advisors. What are we recommending the next person need to do in order to do something related to this topic? Okay. Now, I just kind of covered this slide already. Every article, well, let me phrase that. Most articles have what they call a direction for future research. This section is the gap. This section is the gap. I'm going to say it again. This section is the gap. Everything that was done prior to has no relevance to you. Well, Dr. Benders, when I started reading that article, the author was saying, there's a gap in the studies that talk about X, Y, and Z. That is the gap that they addressed. You're trying to address the next gap, the new recommendation. Think of it like this. If you are a baker, right, and you're in the kitchen and you're looking at a recipe that's been passed down from generation to generation in your family, and it's this specific recipe, but you've started saying, you know what? We got these new seasonings today. So you're going to tell your now offspring, hey, this is the cake that grandma used to make. In order for you to do it better the next time, you may want to use this seasoning versus that seasoning. So they're going to now try that, and then they're going to learn and do it a different way. And they're going to go down to their offspring and say, hey, grandma used to do this, but this not working anymore because we don't make those seasonings anymore. But we need to use it this way. It's the recommendation of what needs to be done next that's going to teach our generation about what we've learned. All right, Dr. Benders, all this sounds great, but how does all this look together? How does all this fit together? How does all this make sense? Now, here's the most powerful part of this thing. The example. I want to introduce everyone to this young man. His name is David. Okay? David is just like many of you. He's working on his doctorate degree and he's finished all his coursework. And he's got a 3.8 cumulative GPA average. Yay for David, right? Everyone blows through the coursework. Coursework is the easy part. He's working on a doctorate degree in education. He's currently employed as assistant superintendent at a school in Kentucky. He's an African-American male. He's very self-conscious, right? Right now in the world, there's a lot of national events that's going on that's causing heightened interest that's inspiring him to write a topic about disbanding ICE. So what is he going to do first? He's going to go to the library, look up all these articles, and start writing, okay? So here's his proposed topic. The study will examine why the government should disband the police due to excessive use of force against people, okay? Now, you want your topic to be something that you're going to be interested in for at least 2 years because you're going to be working on this thing for about 1.5 to 2 years. So this is going to be something very interesting because I'm passionate about it. I know people out there. I see people struggling and these ICE agents are doing X, Y, and Z, and it's too much police brutality. Okay? So here's my introduction statement. When I meet my chair and I explain to him, here's what I want to write. He says, okay, great. America is grounded in racism, injustice, and poor treatment of minority groups. As America began to evolve, the police department was formed to manage safety and majority by oppressed minority. Throughout history, the police have been used to manage and imprison those African Americans that deem to threaten the common culture. Police have recently come under high scrutiny during several incidents of brutality against minorities. Although this has been well documented, researchers continue to struggle in this area. Many minority groups and white supporters call for the total disbandment of the police force. The problem is that police are not here to serve and protect, which violates their motto. This study will demonstrate how police brutality is a prevalent and serious problem in Southwest Kentucky area. Sounds like a wonderful topic, right? Right? The answer is no. This is the typical type of responses that I get from my students in their first submission of, well, tell me what your study is going to be about. If you'll notice, there's a lot of energy in this, right? There's a lot of personal passion. We know that my student is very passionate about this topic. However, my student is very positioned. They're already going into this thing saying the police need to be disbanded. There's evidence out there that police brutality exists. There's this and there's that. All these things are there, right? But this is a position that my student has taken, okay? And this is the starting point. So as the chair, what I'm going to do is tell my student, go find the gap in the literature. So go to the library. You're going to do a basic search. Pay attention. This is what I tell my students to do. Go to the library, do your keyword search. Police brutality, African Americans. You're going to get a list. This one, I want you to do the delimiters where you shrink it down to only the last 3 years, peer-reviewed journals. You do all those shrinkage, right? So you're going to get to in this example, I got 193 responses, okay? Download the first 15. Just click, download, click, download, click, download. Don't read the articles, okay? Just download them to your computer, get out of your search window, all right? You're going to find an article, open it up, scroll straight down to the bottom. What did I say? Don't read the article. This is going to take you all of 15 seconds. You're going to go straight down to the bottom, look for the section called Recommendations for Future Research, or sometimes it's labeled Additional Research Needs to be Done, or Future Scholars, or something related to that. Sometimes it's in a conclusion section, sometimes it's in a limitation sections, but it's not going to be in the body of the article. Rule, it's not going to be in the body of the article. It's going to be at the end. When they're said everything they need to say, when they've done everything they need to do, they're going to tell you additional research needs to be done to do this. Now, okay? What does this say? There's three recommendations that's here, but I'm going to skip this first one and I'm going to go to the second one. This is the first one. We strongly recommend that NPMSRP findings updates. Okay. I don't even know what NPMSRP stand for. And guess what? At this point, I don't care. I'm looking at what are they telling me to do? What is this something in this thing that I'm interested in doing? Okay. So I don't like that one because I don't even understand it. So let's go to the second one. The second one says, the findings of this study beg scholars to more closely examine the stories of men and women that have been victims of police brutality, as evidenced by several of the narratives presented in this study. These experiences were frustrating, demoralizing, traumatizing for the victims because there was no one that can help them. Greater qualitative work in this area would reveal how these individuals and their families remain resilient in the face of trauma, as well as negative physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual effects of the abuse on the victims and their families. Sounds like a mouthful, right? So let's break this thing down. Hey, what does this thing tell me? It already told me what methodology I'm going to use. I'm going to use what? It's going to be quantitative? No, they already told me. Qualitative work. So I already got my methodology. Wow. And I don't even have to guess at that. So boom, check. I got my methodology. But I'm interested in police brutality and disbanding the police, and this doesn't seem to talk about any of that kind of stuff. If it's a gap that you're not interested in, guess what you should do? Close the window, open up the next article, scroll down to the bottom, and find a new gap. I'm going to say it again. You read a gap, you don't like it, close it out, go find another gap. This one talks about a lot of psychology terms, trauma, psychological, spiritual effects. I'm not interested in learning about all that. Not interested in this article. Close the article, go find another gap. Okay? Here's the next gap. Lastly, since this study seemed to focus on how law enforcement is perceived by the public, future scholars should examine the perspectives of these individuals. In particular, such an endeavor would highlight the duality of law enforcement experiences, namely how members of law enforcement see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them. That sounds interesting because I think that if the public sees them in a negative light, they're going to agree with me and we're going to disband the police. I like this topic. Let's break it down. Using that gap, pull out the gap only. What does the gap tell me to do? Note, I am not changing the words. I am keeping the exact same words of the gap and what the gap tells me to do. It says, examine the perspectives of these individuals. Who are these individuals? In particular, such an endeavor would highlight the duality of law enforcement experience, namely how members of law enforcement see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them. That's what the gap is telling me to do. I'm going to go back a slide. Note, this was the direct quote from the gap. I didn't change any words. I extracted only the action item that the gap was telling me to do. It says, examine the perspectives of these individuals. In particular, such an endeavor will highlight the duality of law enforcement members, okay? Namely, how they see themselves, how members of law enforcement see them, as well as how they believe the public perceives them, okay? Not changing the words. And I'll explain to you why that's important in a second, okay? Now, who am I going to collect data from? Directly from the gap. What does it tell me? Does it say police? No. Does it say women? No. It says what? Members of law enforcement. Okay. How am I going to collect data from them? Let's go back to the gap. I'm going to bounce back from slide to slide. It says you want to highlight the duality of law enforcement experiences, how members of law enforcement see themselves, as well as how they believe the public perceives them. So How am I going to collect data from? I got to talk to them. Don't overthink this. The only way for me to collect data from you to learn your experience, I got to do what? I got to talk to you. So if I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to do what? I'm going to interview you. So the only way for me to learn your personal experience is for me to interview you. So if I'm interviewing them, what methodology does that follow? Is that going to be quantitative or qualitative? It's going to be qualitative. Okay. Now, everything in the research process must make sense. It's not arbitrary. So I can't just be like, oh, well, I'm going to do a phenomenology, but I'm going to have three different methodologies. Three different data collection points. It doesn't align. Okay. What qualitative methodology only use one data point? That is called a phenomenology. Okay. So if I had two data points, what qualitative methodology would give me two data points? That's called a descriptive case study. So I'm not arbitrarily pulling stuff out the sky. Everything must make sense. Okay. So if I'm doing this exact same study and I say, you know what, I want to get their personal opinions, but I also want to do a focus group. That's a second data point. The first data point is going to be interviewing the individual people. The second data point would be, I'm going to bring them all together and I'm going to put them in a group and I'm going to ask them a series of questions. Now, if me putting them in a group is that going to get their personal experience about how they believe people perceive them? The answer is no, because they're going to hear everybody else and they're going to be able to say, oh yeah, I agree with that. Oh yeah, I agree with that. But that's not their personal experience. So it violates what the gap is telling me to do. So I can't do a focus group. I can only do an interview. And because I can only do an interview, I'm going to use a phenomenological design. Okay? So what are my research questions going to be? Now, these should sound very familiar. What did the gap tell me to do? I'm pulling the words directly from the gap. What did it say? It said, how do members of law enforcement see themselves regarding police brutality? And how do they believe the public perceives them regarding police brutality? Wow, that was very simple. I got my two research questions. Okay? The wording comes directly from the gap. The gap tells you what to do. The gap tells you what to do. So, one sentence, that gap sentence. Let me show you how powerful this gap sentence is. Ready? The gap tells me the study will examine how members of law enforcement see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them regarding police brutality. Okay? So here's my study. My study is going to be an examination of the dual perception of law enforcement members and police brutality. My research question, how do members of law enforcement see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them? How do members of law enforcement believe the public perceives them regarding police brutality? Okay? Those are my two research questions. The purpose of this qualitative, is it going to be a descriptive case study? No. I'm adding stuff because I don't believe it should be this simple. Will be to understand how law enforcement sees themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them regarding police brutality. What my study is, and I made a mistake there, I used this for a different example. I'm going to take that descriptive part out of my purpose. It's always going to be aligned and say the exact same thing as my phenomenological study. So here's the statement of my study. This qualitative phenomenological study will examine how members of law enforcement see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them regarding police brutality. That is a very clear, concise statement of what my study is going to be. If I presented that one sentence to my chair, they know everything that I'm going to do. This gap gave me everything that I need. It gave me my topic. It gave me my research questions. It gave me my data collection instrument. It told me I'm going to be using an interview, right? It told me my sample group. Who's my sample group? Members of law enforcement, okay? And it gave me my methodology and design, qualitative phenomenological study. Now, I got all that from one sentence. All that came from one sentence. Okay? Does my study meet all of the requirements that are necessary? Every dissertation must be related to your degree area. What was my degree area? Education. Is my study related to my degree area? I'm looking at some people shake yes or no. Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. Does it meet my criteria? Is it related to my degree area? Yes or no? The answer is no, it does not. Why? This study is about criminal justice and law enforcement and that kind of field, right? My field is education. So does it relate? The answer is no. Every dissertation must be relevant and grounded in the literature. Is it grounded in the literature? The answer is yes. It's grounded in the literature based on an article that came from the peer-reviewed journal. Every dissertation must be 3 years, okay? The journal that I looked at, it was 2025. So is it 3 years? The answer is yes. So I got 2 yays and 1 nay. So can I use this dissertation topic? The answer is no, not in its current form. Is there a way, because I'm really, really passionate about this, is there a way for me to use this and tweak it, but not disconnect from what the gap is telling me to do? Is there a way for me to modify this without getting away from the gap, right? The gap is telling me that I should examine how members of law enforcement see themselves. Are there any members of law enforcement in the field of education that I can identify that would fit these parameters for me to be able to do this study? Members of law enforcement. It doesn't say they have to be police, so I can't use police because they're really not specific to education. Someone has their hand up.
Yes, Dr. Benders, you're really awesome. I get it what you're trying to say. My question is, what is really meaning grounded research means really?
Grounded in the research?
Yeah.
It means that it comes from an article. It comes from a peer-reviewed journal article.
Okay. Thank you.
So no problem. So what is there something that I can do to modify this? And the answer is yes. For all my education people, in schools today, not when I was in school, and I know I'm dating myself, they have these people for security. And these people are called school resource officers. Right? So, if I say this study is going to examine how school resource officers see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them regarding police brutality, do I still meet the criteria of the gap? The answer is yes, I do. Because school resource officers are members of law enforcement. But does it say I have to talk to women? No. So should I add women to this? Don't make any sense for you to just narrow it even worse, because guess what? You want to cast the biggest and widest net, that way you can get the most fish. Collecting data is one of the challenges of this process. So you don't need to narrow your study if it's not required to. Okay? So you want to throw the biggest net. Don't shrink it just because you think, oh, well, I need to make it really, really specific so that I get the answers that I want. Your job is to examine how members of law enforcement see themselves and how they believe the public perceives them. Remember, we are exploring something. We're learning about something. Okay? So now this study works. So here's my revised introduction. I know I'm running out of time, so let me speed up a little bit. Okay? Public policy in California in 2020 analyzed data of 40 million is stopped by law enforcement agencies in 2019 to examine the extent of color experiences and searches, enforcement, intrusiveness, and other forms of differences between white individuals. These reports noted that blacks are almost twice as likely to experience police brutality as whites. The problem that is addressed is the equitable use of excessive force in African Americans. The behavior is less distrust from law enforcement and African American community. The recommendation for future research suggests that future scholars should examine the perspectives of these individuals. In particular, such an endeavor would highlight the duality of law enforcement experiences, namely how members of law enforcement see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them. Here we go. This qualitative phenomenological study will examine how school resource officers see themselves as well as how they believe the public perceives them regarding police brutality. That's a more scholarly, pointed study that is grounded in the literature. There's my citation. Okay. Is directly related to my degree, and it's within 3 years old. It can't be this simple, Dr. Benders. The truth is, it very much is. And what happens is this. My students will go through these exercises and they'll say, oh, Dr. Benders, is not that simple. So let's scroll down real quick to the research question. We're going to add some extra research questions in here. So when we look at research question number 3, you'll see that I say, well, how does race influence police behavior? You have now changed the study. Why are police targeting African Americans? You have now changed the study. All because you believe you can't have just 2 research questions. There's a difference between research questions and interview questions. Okay? The research questions are designed to answer what the overall study is going to be about. The interview questions ask questions that will get you to an answer of this main research question. But because you've added these research questions, you have now messed up your alignment and your study is not going to move forward. Key takeaways. A dissertation is not for you to solve anything. You are simply exploring information related to your topic. You want to stay focused on the keywords of the gap. Everything that you do with your dissertation and your research starts with the gap. If you take this approach and you identify a gap, it will minimize the number of times you go in front of your computer and you have no clue what it is. Okay? Earlier, I talked about that committee. Now, you have a committee and you send them that information. You say, oh, well, David, I think this is a great study, but I don't think you should do it in a qualitative manner. You should do it quantitatively. Now you can say, Dr. Benders, I love that idea. However, Johnson's study stated that additional research needed to be done to examine the perspectives of these individuals. In order to examine perspectives, it only can be done using a qualitative methodology. So although I want to change it to quantitative, I can't. Being grounded in the literature doesn't allow you to navigate and shift it all over the place. So now no one's personal opinion can make you change it. Oh, you shouldn't talk to members of law enforcement. You should talk to just the victims. I would love to, but this recommendation states that additional research needs to be done to understand why members of law enforcement see themselves. Everything now is focused and grounded in the literature and is not able to be changed or shifted. What I like to do when I do this exercise with my students, I take them and make them put it on a Word document. And what I've done is shown you what that looks like. When I pull it on a Word document, I take that gap and I put it on the Word document by itself and I ask these various questions. What does the gap tell you to do? All the things that we did on the various slides. Okay? Understanding the gap brings you full circle. Earlier, I talked about what the article does. They had a gap. They did their study. They came up with their conclusion. What do you think they did? They made a recommendation for the next researcher. When you do your dissertation, you should have in your chapter 1 a gap that justifies the foundation of what your study is going to be. Then you're going to do your study. Guess what you do in your chapter 5? You make recommendations for the next researcher. It brings it all together in a circle. Only do what the gap is telling you to do and don't add to it. Keep it very simple. Thank you. I know it was a little long, but it was a lot that I had to cover. I'm open to questions.
Hi, Dr. Render. Thank you so much. Truly, everything you have said has validated my feelings as a student. It has provided clarity, and it's really given me encouragement. Regarding the example that you used with the school officer, could that also have been applied to, let's say, a professor that teaches criminal justice who was a retired police officer, or maybe somebody that's in the academy? I'm just trying to understand, like, how far in terms of the person to interview I could stretch.
Okay. What would be your degree program?
Okay, so my PhD is in marriage and family therapy, And you want to hear my topic?
Nope.
Okay.
So we're using that example.
Yes, sir. Using
Okay,
your
so
example.
if my degree program is in marriage and family counseling, that's not anything that I can have a study about. I would have to go find a new gap.
Yes, completely understood.
Okay.
But I was just wondering, would those be other options if I were an education major?
Would what be another option? Talking to somebody that's
Speak,
retired?
yeah, speaking to somebody,
Yeah.
let's say that's
If
a
they're
professor
retired,
that's,
as long as they're members of law enforcement,
yes.
as long as they're members of law enforcement, you don't have any other parameters or criterias,
Okay.
right? So your only criteria for your sample group is that they have to be members of law enforcement.
Okay.
That's why I
Okay.
didn't narrow it to women. I didn't say I'm only going to talk to women, only going to talk to men, I'm only going to talk to green people, orange people, purple people. I didn't do all that. All I said was the only thing it told me to do is talk to people who are members of law enforcement. It didn't say they had to be FBI, detective, sergeants, office. None of those requirements were there. The only requirement was members of law enforcement. And that's the beauty of this gap. It tells you what to do and who you're going to speak to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next.
Uh, can I go, Arun Kasala?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brenda, sir. Question is about the gap. Suppose we found a gap in the research, like a peer review article. You've
Uh-huh.
taken that gap and you're working on my dissertation or my dissertation. If somebody other person started same gap, does it conflict? Same person maybe is from not from university, national university, some other university. Does my dissertation will be in a dilemma or no?
No. I get that question all the time. They're like, oh, Dr. Benz, I got the perfect gap.
Yeah, can you
And
explain
then
me what?
they find somebody that's doing a dissertation, not at national, but somewhere else because they're doing research, and someone did the exact same study. Guess what? Every location, every dissertation, and every research study is not law. Just because someone did a study, all a study is a snapshot in society and in time. For example, 10 years ago, I did a study and I asked people, will they work from home? Everybody on that study said I would absolutely not work from home because I wouldn't be productive. I would lose my job. I would get too distracted. I did that exact same study after COVID to the exact same people. 99% of them said, I am absolutely not interested in going back into my office. Does that mean that my first study was not good? No, it does not. My study met the research protocol. The reason why we do social science and why there's a big argument and dilemma between social science and hard science is because 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4. But in social science, you can ask somebody one thing. Well, how are you feeling today? I'm feeling marvelous. I just won the lottery. Well, how are you feeling tomorrow? I feel terrible. I bet on black and I hit red. Does it mean that my study was not good? No. I meet the research protocol, and that's why my study is valid.
Thank you, sir.
Jenna, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Benders. I absolutely love this presentation. So here's my thing. I'm not even close to doing my dissertation, but what if my committee chair does not understand my topic? Like what if they believe that this disorder doesn't really exist? It's not real. How am I supposed to deal with something like that? And a lot of it's just 2 parts. And a lot of the research that's been done on my topic is over 5 years old. So I don't know if I'm stuck or do I need to come up with another topic? So any suggestions?
Okay, so let me answer the first question. Rule number 1, when your study is grounded in literature, as your chair, I don't have to believe or agree with your study whatsoever. Okay, that's the beauty of this approach. It minimizes the amount of personal perception that any committee member can review. Okay, now I've taught at other universities, so that's really my motivation on how I came up with this approach for students. Now I have not experienced a lot of this here at National, but it eliminates anyone's ability to say, well, I don't think we want to do this because I don't believe that mental health is a really valid issue right now in the United States. I think this generation is just soft. So what? Johnson states that additional research needs to be done to better understand the anxiety levels of X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. Sorry that you don't agree, but this is the study that I'm doing based on what the literature says. So it eliminates
Awesome.
the idea that I have to agree or believe in what it is that you're going to do, that I can have it grounded in the literature. Okay? First point. Second point, if no one is studying it anymore, maybe the content or the topic is exhausted. Or maybe you need to look at it, your keyword searches. You need to ask those keyword searches in a different way. For example, if I go in and I do a keyword search on slavery, I'm not going to find anything. Nobody's studying slavery today, right? But if I change that and I say human sex trafficking, I'm going to get a bunch of stuff because a bunch of people are. Now, aren't those two ideas very similar? So sometimes your searches is your keyword search. I love National University because guess what you can do? You can go to the library, set up a library appointment, and they're going to help you find your entire lit review.
Exactly. Love it.
I love it. Yeah, I'm
Thank
jealous.
you.
I still have binders
Thank
for my
you.
dissertation.
Are
You're very
you
welcome.
in psychology, by the way? Are you anywhere related to psychology?
I do have a background in psychology. I have a degree in psychology as well, yes.
Oh, so you can. Ooh,
No, I
are
can't
you?
be your chair. I'm busy.
Darn
I'm,
it!
I'm not busy like I don't want to be a chair or anything like that. I'm just my load is already saturated. I'm sorry. I don't want to say it like that because students be like, oh, Dr. Bender said it. I did not say it that way.
I know
I'm
what you
just
mean.
okay. I just don't want to get in trouble.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Y'all, this was awesome.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I don't believe so. I
Yes,
think
Marla, you cannot be my student.
but only because of overload.
Right, that's right. Any other
Well,
questions?
that's
No.
okay, Dr. Benders. I still love you and I appreciate everything that you have done for me. And I'm so glad that I was able to hop on this because I've taken everything that you have said and gone back through all the notes that you gave me in class to make sure that I'm putting that in whenever it's like I made a list of these are the things that Dr. Bender says, and how can I attribute this to everything that it is I'm doing?
Yes.
I think I
Dr.
saw your hand when I
Johnson,
looked.
I have
I
one
had,
question, maybe. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know how to raise on Zoom. So, my question is, like, it this possible? I mean, like constructing or building a gap from two research. Like, I got gaps in two literatures, so three or more. And then I was thinking a scenario, but I couldn't come with. But is that possible, like to combine both, to combine those and come up with one research topic or statement?
Yes, and it's called marrying the gaps. Okay. Now, the example that I use is I use that example because it gives me the best answer, right? It's what we call the golden egg. The gap gives me everything that I possibly could want, right? But there are some gaps that's going to be out there that are going to be very, very vague. Okay. So someone may say additional research needs to be done to better understand mental health in different communities. It's very vague, right? Then you got another article that you read that says additional research needs to be done to better understand the mental impact of married men in low income environments. And you say this qualitative case study is going to address the gap from Bender's and Simon's recommendations. It's going to be a qualitative case study that's going to examine, and you marry both of those gaps and you put them together to make them make sense. You don't need to have multiple gaps, but you can do a gap with just one, but you can use multiple to support your study. Okay, but you can only use you can do one with just one gap, but you can use two to strengthen the argument or make the case on what it is that you're going to study and why you're studying it this way. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so
Yes.
much. That's clear. Maybe one is this also like a recommended way, like combining this, or is it better like to go
Either
to
one
start from a
works.
single. Okay.
No, either one works because sometimes, depending on what your topic is, there may not be AI. A lot of students now want to study the whole AI thing, right? They think AI is going to be the next greatest sliced piece of bread. Guess what? So what? Nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
Some people don't care about it. Some people love it. Some people think AI is going to take over the world. No, you're going to have all these varying opinions. So you may have a recommendation that says, hey, somebody needs to study how AI is affecting or taking jobs. But you have another one that says AI is creating new jobs. And you may say, I'm going to look at both how people perceive AI, and I'm going to look at all three. Because now you got another gap over here and just said people should look at how people are looking at AI holistically. And you may say, hey, I'm going to look at Solomon's study that says AI is going to take jobs away. I'm going to look at Bender's study that says AI is going to add jobs to the economy. And I'm going to look at James' study that says we need to understand what AI is all about. So now you talked about these three different arguments that are all saying similar things on the holistic lens of what we should look at with AI. Make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much, Doctor.
You're welcome. Dr. G, I saw your hand up.
Hi, Dr. Manders. How are you?
Hey.
No, I was calling for you guys. There was I believe it was Miss Donna McGovern had her hands up. And I was going to tell you also that Solomon had also had his hand up.
Oh, okay.
That's all. But I think we lost Miss Donna.
Actually, I was
Oh, she's there.
saying
Sorry.
goodbye. I thought it was being called to a halt, and I was just waving. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. But if you had a question, this was your chance.
Yeah, no, not yet. Not yet. I'm sure I will one day. Thank you.
Keon?
Hi again. Okay. Hi. So the question that the gentleman just asked kind of have me thinking in terms of my research. And all right, I got to figure out how to phrase it without saying too much about what the research is specifically. So in choosing the gap, right? Because in my mind, I already in my mind, I have two populations that I would like to quote unquote interview, right? One is the professional population, like your example said, police officers, right? And then the other one, let's say, is the victims or the survivors of that interaction. But it's of a separate thing. So let's say a therapist and her clients, right?
Yeah, let's pause real quick. What does your gap tell you to do? Because talking to the victims and talking to the survivors and talking to this, that's a whole lot of different information, right?
Okay.
This is why you stay focused on what is the gap telling you to do. Not the gap from what they said, but what is the recommendation for research? Go back through the example that I provided with you, and that's going to answer and narrow much of what you're trying to do.
Well, and that's just it. So how do I know which set of articles to choose?
Pick one. Notice I said stop reading all these articles. Y'all are confusing yourselves with reading 8 million articles. Just go down to you got a list. If you go into your computer, just like me, you got a folder that got 8 million articles saved in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pull out the first 15 and say, what does the bottom say? Scroll straight down to the bottom, read the recommendations for research. You know what? I like them. I like that one. Nope, I don't like that one. Throw it away. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. Pick one, read it, pull that out, put it on a blank sheet of paper and say, what does this gap tell me to do? The gap is telling me to examine, you said marriage counseling?
Yeah, marriage and family therapy.
Examine why men are the ones who are filing for divorce more than women. Then I'm going to do a study that's going to examine why men are filing for divorce more than women. That's what I'm examining, right? So who am I going to talk to? Am I going to talk to women or am I going to talk to men? Talk to men, because I'm going to ask them their opinion. Why are you the ones that are filing for divorce? I might talk to women because they're the victim of that, right? So I might ask them, well, why are men filing for divorce and you didn't file for divorce? That's still going to answer your research question. You now can explain and say, well, I'm going to talk to men who filed and I'm going to talk to women who didn't file. And I'm going to ask, well, why didn't you file? Because that's going to give me some information. And I'm going to say, why did you file? And that's going to give me some information. And both of them meet the objective of the research question the gap that is telling you what it is that you're going to do. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Find the gap and do what the gap tells you to do. Minimize y'all stress. This approach minimizes a lot of the stress that you guys are stressed out about trying to, well, I feel like we all want to make this thing make us, we all want to walk around and be called doctor, right? Everybody want to be, oh, doctor. Guess what it means? Absolutely nothing. It means you've been in school longer than everybody else. All of y'all have met someone who has been called doctor, and you meet them, you talk to them, and then you walk away and be like, that person is dumb as bricks. How the heck did they get a doctorate degree? So stop believing that this thing is this daunting. Oh my God, they got a doctor. Great. So what? They was in school a long time. Meet the expectations and get it done. So then you too can be called doctor. And then you can be a teacher right on the board and spell the and get there, and there wrong. So what? He's still going to call you doctor. Okay? Don't overthink this. It's just a paper. Other questions?
I do not see any other questions, and we are over time.
Oh, yes, I knew we were going to be.
When is the next session?
The next session for me?
Yes, there has to be a part 2. You got to get me to the end of this paper, right?
Oh, man. I'm thinking about doing one on problem statement because my students are really messing this problem statement thing up, and it's really starting to frustrate me.
That would be a great one.
Yeah. Problem statement is so simple. Yeah. I keep getting told I make this stuff seem very simple, so I think I'm going to do one on problem statement. I hope this makes sense. Thank you guys for coming and participating, and feel free to email me if you have any questions. I'm open to that. I will help you as much as I can.
Thank you. Looking forward to
Thank you.
problem statements.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.